way of Will John.
You're kind of an expert in that field. So I want to kick it over to you just for the people that kind of want to have a dip in. Maybe they're a little worried. Maybe,
Yeah, absolutely. I think in case people don't know my background, one of the most important things that it is important to be aware of is you might see me as an accomplished polyglot, but in my 20s, I could only speak English. That's my starting point. I was not naturally talented in languages. I studied electronic engineering. I consider
Okay.
tech to be where my heart truly lies. And
Okay.
I moved to Spain and lived there for 6 months, and I didn't learn any Spanish in those first 6 months. So that's very important to get out of the bat, because it's very tempting to decide that somebody who speaks a bunch of languages does so because they're just naturally talented. It's just they're born with this gene. I did very poorly in German in school, the language that I studied, and I did not successfully learn Spanish in those first 6 months. So what changed was after having exposure to not just my own failed attempts, but seeing other people successfully learn Spanish who had just arrived, and they were also engineers like myself because I was part of a work exchange program. I would ask them, "What are you doing that's making you successfully learn the language?" And it did take a while to sink in. They were telling me effectively what the right answer was, and I didn't want to hear it. I wanted to hear that they had some special cassette tape they were listening to, because people used cassettes back then. That's how far ago it was. That they were listening to while they slept, or that they used a specific book that magically solved all their problems.
Right.
And
Exactly.
eventually it sunk in. What they were actually telling me is that they're just genuinely trying to speak the language, and that's what I was not doing. I was trying to study the language. I was trying to learn the language. I was never trying to use the language. And the biggest lesson by far that I've learned is to embrace making mistakes. When you think of an accomplished polyglot, it's just not congruent in a lot of people's minds. They imagine someone who's effectively a genius, so that it's just not congruent with the idea that you actually have to embrace being a complete moron. And this is my greatest skill, that I'm okay with sounding like an idiot. I'm okay
Exactly.
with
That's
speaking
everything.
like Tarzan, you know?
Yeah. No, that's actually, and as a matter of fact, that was the exact, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but the exact answer. I just did a video with someone who's an American who moved to Sweden, who speaks now Swedish in all his YouTube videos. And he's, become kind of a little local celebrity, because he speaks with a very thick accent. Um, However, same thing as we got to speaking about it. Well, how did you get to the, you know what? I just don't care. I don't care how I sound. I don't care at the beginning. I look ridiculous. I don't mind having to have that little few minutes of struggle going through that, because, the truth is that when you get into a type of, I need to learn and use this, which is my biggest, I guess you could call it, not really a pet peeve, annoyance with the school system and studying these grammar and studying through. None of my friends speak Spanish either. They've all taken like 6 or 7 years. I can't imagine spending that much time doing something and then coming out with absolutely almost nothing. And it just doesn't make any sense to me how that's the case. But yeah, just to your point, there's no way around this. You've got to enjoy it. I enjoy making mistakes, being whatever. And people are kind of maybe afraid of getting critiqued, or what it feels like, to do that. And I know that holds a lot of people back. I know it does. That's something people say. I don't want to do that. I want to try and do this. So maybe more specifically, maybe you can mention what are your active languages. What are the things that you actually have done? I think guys would love, to hear about that.
Yeah, so I have a little calendar here. You can just barely make it out. That effectively reminds me the languages I've got on which day of the week. So I switch between them. I try to use at least 4 or 5 hours. Keep in mind, this is where I'm at in maintenance mode. This is not something I suggest people start off with. Like, you want to become a polyglot? The way to do that is not to have Monday be your Spanish day, Tuesday be your Portuguese day. Absolutely not. But I'm currently in maintenance mode. It's something I like to do between my projects. So maybe next year I learn a new language, and then I'll have to accept that my current languages might suffer a little and go down slightly while I'm not focused on them. For the moment, I would say I'm actively learning and maintaining my German, French, Irish, Mandarin, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and American Sign Language. And
Wow.
I would have all of those in a broad range. So, for instance, my Irish, that's Gaelic for people who wouldn't know of it, and my Mandarin would be at the lower intermediate level, which specifically means I can have lots of conversations as long as the person I'm speaking to is patient. But then a few would be at the fluent level. So my Italian and German are definitely fluent. I can have conversations about pretty much anything. And I still make the odd mistake and such, but I don't need the other person to slow down. They don't need to use like simplified words. Whereas the likes of my Spanish would be at the C2 mastery level. I've got a diploma of mastery in Spanish. I've worked as an electronic engineer in Spanish. So you have this big range, but effectively those are the languages that I'm actively using nowadays.